There is a silence that only exists in one place on earth. Not in libraries, not in churches, not in the dead of night when the world has gone to sleep. It exists on a golf course, in that razor-thin sliver of time between when a ball leaves a club and when the universe decides its fate. It is a silence so thick, so suffocating, that grown men forget to breathe. Commentators forget to speak. And sometimes, just sometimes, that silence stretches so long, becomes so impossibly heavy, that when it finally breaks, it doesn't break with noise. It breaks with something far more powerful. It breaks with tears. This is the story of one shot. One man. One moment that split the history of golf into two halves, the world before it happened and the world after. The odds weren't just against him. The laws of nature were against him. The geometry was against him. Every professional analyst, every veteran caddy, every seasoned coach standing on that course that day had already written the ending in their heads. They were wrong. What happened next didn't just leave the crowd speechless. It left an entire sport questioning what it thought it knew about human potential, about pressure, about the impossible, and about what happens when one person simply refuses to accept that something cannot be done. And if you've ever stood at the edge of something that felt completely unwinnable, drop a comment right now and tell me. Did you take the shot, or did you walk away? Because this man's answer to that question changed everything. The year was 2023. The tournament was the final round of one of the most watched amateur-to-professional crossover events in recent golf history. A course carved into the Scottish Highlands, ancient and unforgiving, where the wind doesn't just blow, it conspires. Where the rough doesn't just punish bad shots, it buries them. The course had a reputation. Veterans called it the argument, because every hole seemed to have a debate with you about whether you deserved to be there. His name was Daniel Ashford, 26 years old, a name most golf fans hadn't yet memorized, but a name that was about to be burned into the collective memory of an entire sport. Daniel had come up through the kind of golf journey that doesn't make highlight reels, public courses, hand-me-down clubs, a father who taught him the game on a patchy municipal green in a small town in northern England where the greens were never properly mowed and the fairways were suggestions more than promises. He had qualified for this tournament not through sponsorship, not through legacy, not through the kind of connections that open doors before talent even knocks. He qualified through sheer, grinding, relentless consistency over 18 months of regional events where the prize money barely covered travel and the recognition barely covered pride. He wasn't the story anyone had come to watch. He was the name people skimmed past on the leaderboard on their way to find the familiar names, the safe bets, the established reputations. But sport has never respected the script we write for it. By the 14th hole of the final round, Daniel Ashford was tied for the lead. Not close to the lead. Not a respectable distance behind. Tied. For the lead. The crowd that had gathered near his group had started as a handful of curious spectators and had quietly grown into something else entirely. Something electric, something nervous, something that happens when an audience realizes they might be watching history form in real time and are terrified to look away. And then came the 15th hole. A par 4. 412 yards. A dogleg left so severe it looked less like a golf hole and more like a geographical argument. The fairway narrowed at the bend to barely 30 yards wide, flanked on the left by dense gorse bushes that had been growing on that hillside for longer than the tournament had existed, and on the right by a slope that fed directly into a water hazard so unforgiving it had its own nickname among the caddies, the Apology. Daniel's tee shot was good. Not perfect. Good. It landed in the fairway, but closer to the right edge than he would have liked, which meant his approach to the green was partially obscured by a cluster of ancient birch trees that curved out across the playing line at exactly the wrong angle. He had 173 yards to the flag. The green was elevated. The wind was cutting across from the right at roughly 15 miles per hour. And those trees, those beautiful, indifferent, centuries-old trees, sat directly between him and a clean line to the pin. His caddy, a man named Pete who had been walking courses for 31 years and had seen nearly everything the game could produce, looked at the lie, looked at the trees, looked at the flag, and said 3 words. Just 3. Quietly, the way veterans say things when they already know the answer but want to give the moment its due respect. He said, "Lay up, Danny. Lay up. Take the safe shot. Move the ball forward. Avoid the trees. accept a longer third shot. Take your par, protect the tie, live to fight on the next hole. That is what experience says. That is what probability says. That is what every rational voice in a rational mind would say when presented with this exact configuration of obstacles. Daniel Ashford stood over his ball for 47 seconds. We know this because the broadcast footage was later reviewed frame by analysts who couldn't believe what they were watching. 47 seconds of stillness, so complete that the only movement in the frame was the grass bending gently in the wind. His eyes moved from the ball to the trees to the flag and back again. Once, twice, 3 times. Like he was having a conversation with the geometry of the situation. Like he was negotiating. Here's what the physics said was impossible. To reach that flag from that position, a ball would need to curve sharply left around the outer edge of the birch trees, lose almost no velocity in doing so, climb the elevation change of the green, and stop within reasonable proximity of the hole. To produce that ball flight, a player would need to hit a draw of approximately 31 degrees of curve while maintaining enough club speed to cover the distance. The ball would have to travel through a window between the last birch tree and the gorse bush on the left that was, at best, 11 feet wide. The margin for error was not small. It was almost non-existent. He took the shot. What happened in the next 4.3 seconds, again, measured precisely by broadcast analysts afterward, is the reason you're watching this video. The ball left the club face with a sound that witnesses described as different. Not louder, not harder, just different. The kind of sound that makes a crowd instinctively look up rather than track the ball from launch. It flew right, seemingly toward the trees, and for a fraction of a second, 3,000 people inhaled simultaneously in that particular way crowds do when they think something beautiful is about to be destroyed. And then the ball curved. Not gradually, decisively. It moved through that 11-foot window between the tree and the gorse like it had been threaded by someone who had practiced this exact shot 10,000 times in a place where the laws of physics were negotiable. It climbed. It reached the elevated green. It landed 6 feet past the flag, and it released. It rolled back. Slowly, deliberately, as if the course itself had decided to cooperate, just this once. It stopped 8 inches from the hole. If you've been holding your breath watching this story unfold, if you felt something shift in your chest in the last 30 seconds, then you already understand why what comes next matters even more than the shot itself. The commentator on the broadcast didn't speak for 4 full seconds after the ball stopped. 4 seconds of dead air on a live sports broadcast is an eternity. When he finally found his voice, he didn't reach for superlatives. He didn't describe the shot technically. He said, quietly, almost to himself, "I don't know what I just watched." That honest confusion, that authentic disbelief from a man whose entire professional life was built around finding words for golf moments. That moment of speechlessness became the clip that spread faster than the shot itself. The crowd didn't cheer immediately either. That is perhaps the most remarkable detail of all. There was a pause, a collective processing delay, the kind that only happens when human beings witness something that doesn't fit any existing category in their experience. And then the sound that came wasn't a roar. It was something more complicated. Something that mixed joy and disbelief and grief and wonder into a sound that had no name. Pete, the caddy with 31 years of experience, stood on the fairway with both hands pressed flat against the sides of his face. Not celebrating, just holding himself together. He was later asked in an interview what went through his mind when the ball dropped toward the hole. He paused for a long time before answering. Then he said, "I've spent 30 years telling players what's possible and what isn't. That boy just made me want to apologize to every one of them." If that hit you, if you've ever had someone in your life tell you what you couldn't do, this video deserves a moment of your support. Not for the algorithm, for Daniel, for Pete, for every person who's ever stood over something impossible and taken the swing anyway. Daniel Ashford went on to birdie that hole. He won the tournament by 2 shots. But the story didn't end on the 18th green. What happened in the weeks and months after that shot revealed something far more important than a scoreline. The footage spread globally, not through traditional sports media first, through people, through individual human beings who watched it on their phones and sent it to someone they loved, or someone they were trying to inspire, or someone who had recently given up on something hard. Teachers sent it to students. Coaches sent it to athletes. Parents sent it to children who were struggling. The shot transcended its sport because the story it told was not really about golf. It was about what happens in that 47 seconds of stillness before a decision. It was about what it means to hear every rational voice say lay up and choose, with full awareness of the risk, to attempt the thing that shouldn't be possible. Sports psychologists wrote about it. A physicist at a Scottish university published a paper analyzing the ball flight. Golf coaches incorporated it into teaching materials not as a technique to emulate, but as a question to sit with. What is the relationship between belief and outcome? Does the certainty with which we approach an attempt change the physical result? The paper generated more public interest than any golf-related academic work in recent memory. But Daniel himself gave only one extended interview in the months following the shot. And what he said in that interview was not what anyone expected. He wasn't triumphant. He wasn't boastful. He was quiet and precise in the way people are when they've had time to examine something they don't fully understand. He said, "I didn't know I could make that shot. I genuinely did not know. But I also didn't know I couldn't. And in that gap, in that space between not knowing and not knowing, I decided that the only honest thing was to try." That idea, that the gap between I don't know if I can and I don't know if I can't, is actually not a gap of fear, but a gap of freedom. That concept has been quoted in motivational contexts, in educational settings, in sports psychology literature, and in quiet private conversations between people making difficult decisions ever since. What does this story mean beyond the fairway? Beyond the scorecard and the broadcast and the viral clip? It means that the most paralyzing voice in any high-pressure moment is not the voice of doubt. Doubt is honest. Doubt at least admits the possibility of success even while questioning it. The most paralyzing voice is the voice of certainty, the voice that has already done the math, already measured the angle, already decided the outcome before the club even moves. Daniel Ashford didn't silence that voice. He didn't overcome it. He simply chose not to give it the final vote. Every person who has ever stood at the edge of something that felt impossible, a conversation they needed to have, a career they wanted to attempt, a relationship they needed to save, a shot they were afraid to take, knows this feeling. The body ready, the mind negotiating, the world waiting, and that long, silent pause before the decision. The shot was extraordinary, but the 47 seconds before it were everything. If this story found you at a moment when you needed it, if something in Daniel's 47 seconds of stillness reflected something in your own life right now, then this channel exists for exactly that reason. Not just to tell sports stories, to tell human stories wearing a sports jersey. If that's what you're looking for, you already know what to do. The ball is on the fairway. The trees are in the way. And the only question that has ever mattered is the same one it's always been.